Capitola Black Recordings presents an unabridged recording of The Lost Jewel by Charlotte Marie Tucker, or A Lady of England. Chapter 6. Sunday Morning. It is a bright, glorious morning in May. The large white clouds with their pearly edges scarce move in the soft blue ether. Nature wears her holiday garb. Every fruit tree is bursting into blossom, and the hedges are gay with flowers. Even in crowded London the influence of the sweet season is felt. It is the Sabbath, and a Sabbath brightness seems to be shed around. The streets are filled with streams of people moving in various directions, where the sound of the church bells summon them to their respective places of worship. Families that can meet but little during the week have met together now. The worn artisan has donned his Sunday coat, and is enjoying, as the weary only can enjoy, the calm of the day of rest. The man of business has gladly thrown aside his 6 days' burden of care, and surveys with pride the little group of his children, to whom, but for the Sunday's holiday, he must have been almost a stranger. The aged mother, in her decent weeds, can go to the house of prayer, leaning on the arm of her apprentice son, and united families together blend their thanksgivings and songs of praise. Sir John's pew is not empty, nor full, for it is a rule which he never breaks, under no circumstances to admit a stranger. He occupies the place next to the door, with large gold-clasped prayer-book before him, and, unless when occasionally dozing a little during a lengthened sermon, he appears as devout and attentive in his manner as the greater part of the congregation. His daughter, elegantly dressed, is at his side, and beyond her, with his large, earnest eyes fixed upon the clergyman, is Maurice Somers, her pale young cousin. Why does Sir John Allison regularly attend divine service on Sundays? Assuredly not to learn what he thinks that he knows already, assuredly not to confess to God the sins that never trouble his conscience, to return thanks for earthly blessings which he regards not as coming from above, or to ask for spiritual gifts to which he attributes no value. Sir John comes to church because it is respectable to do so, because he thinks it well to set an example to the lower orders, or, perhaps, simply from the force of habit powerful in one of his nature. It is not thus with Albina. She attends the service from a vague idea that it is her duty to do so. Her conscience, such as it is, would not be altogether easy were all forms of religion neglected. But that conscience is easily contented. The tax which it exacts is not a heavy one. One chapter of the Bible hurried over in the morning, attendance at church once every Sunday, and occasionally on weekdays, if no better engagement offers. A little money bestowed in alms to the poor, with whom she never comes into personal contact, are sufficient evidence to Albina that she is in the sure path to heaven. The very means of grace blinds her to the absence of grace. So that her person be found in a place of worship, she thinks it no sin to mock the Searcher of hearts, by making his house a very temple of all the vanities of the world. While her form assumes a posture of devotion, through Albina's mind passes one unbroken stream of the most vain and frivolous thoughts. Scenes from the theatre, opera airs, the last dress which she wore, the last tale of gossip which she heard, such are the subjects of her meditation, while the voice of earnest prayer is raising around her to God. Albina is at this moment rather annoyed by the audible responses of Maurice so close at her side. By turning her head, rustling her dress, giving little impatient coughs, she would afford him hints that she is worried and disturbed by the low murmur of his voice. The boy, in the simplicity of his devotion, does not understand, or perhaps notice these hints of his sensitive cousin. In joining the prayers that he knows so well, in feeling himself one of God's great family of visible worshippers below, and invisible worshippers above, Maurice has lost for a while his sense of loneliness, and finds that peace which is sweeter and purer than the joys of earth. But my story remains not at present with the baronet or his family. My subject is the jewel which they have lost. Mrs. Brown on this Sunday morning has exchanged her dark silk dress for a flounced one of brilliant green, her lace cap for a gaudy bonnet, and in the red shawl which enwraps her broad shoulders, set in a most lead-like imitation of silver, we recognize the magnificent gem which cost Gilbert Allison his life. Mrs. Brown is not arrayed for church. It is probable that she has never entered such a building since the day of her marriage. She is dressed in her best for a Sunday ploy, a merry expedition into the country with the family and a large party of friends. A van has been hired for the occasion, drawn by 2 tired horses, whose drooping heads and bending knees seems to plead for one day of rest in the 7. The van is already almost filled with a jovial party of young men, plentifully supplied with cigars, and by gaily dressed, laughing girls, whose loud, merry voices resounded along the street. All are ready and eager for the start, only waiting for the landlady herself, who with umbrella and large heavy basket which needs the support of both hands, is stopping at the door of the Green Lion to give some last order to the barmaid. "Come, missus, come! We should have been off half an hour ago," cried one of the party from the van. "I bring that as is worth waiting for," was the reply. "Just lend a hand here to lift up the basket." "Nothing forgotten? All right. Sandwiches, bottled stout, pigeon pie, and all?" shouted a youth from the box. "Let her alone for that," cried another, adding with an oath, "She's the one to look after the victuals, the general what keeps an eye to the commissariat." "Are there oranges?" inquired one of the girls. "Oranges? Why, no. It is too late in the season for oranges," said the stout landlady, on the point of mounting to her seat, a feat not to be accomplished without some exertion. "They're not out yet, for I ate one yesterday, and there's nothing like them in a hot day like this. As good luck will have it, here comes a man with a basket of oranges." Mrs. Brown, a good-natured woman, again placed on the pavement the foot which she had raised to the step of the van, and, turning round towards a thin, bent man who approached with his little merchandise, she began chaffering for a cheap supply of the mellow fruit. While she was engaged in disputing the point whether 14 or 16 oranges should go for a shilling, the merry party in the van were cutting jokes with each other, or urging Mrs. Brown to dispatch. A pale young man in black coat and white neckcloth, who was passing along the narrow way, stopped for a moment and surveyed the group with a hesitating air. "A parson?" "No, a city missionary." "One of your saints," went the whispers round the van. "He'll be giving us tracts," giggled a merry girl, and scarcely had the words passed from her lips when, as if mustering up courage for an effort, the gentleman crossed the street and went up to the conveyance. "Would you accept from me a little Sunday reading, my friends?" was his courteous address to the party. 1 or 2 hands were stretched out to receive the paper which the young clergyman offered, but the next minute the action was followed by a derisive laugh from the occupants of the van, and the tract was flung back to the giver. "Keep your trash for them as wants it," cried the landlady as, assisted by her companions, she struggled up to her place. "Mind your own business and leave us to mind ours," shouted the youth who had thrown back the tract. The driver, with a sharp crack of the whip, now gave the signal for moving on. The jaded horses, with convulsive start, set the heavily laden vehicle in motion. The van rattled over the stones, and soon, with the gay party which it carried, disappeared from view. The clergyman sighed, and stooped to pick up the tract from the dust on which it lay. His feeling was not anger, but sorrow at the insult offered to religion in the person of its minister. "Yet have they all souls, immortal souls," he murmured, as if to himself. "Oh, could they but realize the fact!" Here was a man who could recognize the value of a jewel, however coarse and repulsive the setting in which it appeared. As Mr. Manton turned to depart, his eye fell on the poor vendor of oranges, who was wistfully regarding the rejected tract. The clergyman offered it with a smile, and this time it was thankfully accepted. "Thank you kindly, sir," said the man. "My wife likes and I like such reading as this." "Then I trust, my friend, that you are one who seek to know and serve your God. Yet I grieve to find you breaking one of his commandments by selling fruit upon Sunday. Do you not remember the law? Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy?" "Ah, sir, but the like of us can't keep it. I'm a poor man, a very poor man. I can't give up my Sunday trade." "It would be difficult for you to give up," said the clergyman very gently. "God knows how difficult it would be. But Christians through all ages have given up, and are giving up things dear as a right hand or a right eye for the sake of the Master they love, remembering that he left the throne of heaven and gave his blood and his life for them. And never did one saint or one martyr think at the last that he had given up too much for his God." "It's all real true, sir," said the man with a sigh. "I learnt all that at my Sunday school. I always went to school as a boy, but I can't see my sick wife want, sir, and I don't think the good God would be hard on us for doing something to get a bit of bread upon Sundays." "Have you forgotten the promise? Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed." Do you think that the God of truth and of love is unable or unwilling to keep that promise, or that you will ever have real cause to regret having trusted and obeyed your Creator? The man looked hesitatingly down at his basket. "You see, sir, I gains more on Sunday than on any other day of the week." "If you gained treasures of silver and gold, you would still be a loser," said the young clergyman earnestly. "For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul?" And leaving these most solemn words of Scripture to sink into the poor man's heart, the minister turned and went on his way. "How much easier is it for such as he to serve the God than for me?" thought the orange seller as he sadly took up the basket which he had put down during the preceding conversation. He little knew that Edward Manton was at that time on the point of completing a sacrifice greater than any he himself had ever been called upon to make. On the following day, the young clergyman would bid farewell to father and mother, all the delights of a happy home, all the comforts of civilized life, to carry God's message to the heathen in Africa's deadly clime. A bitter parting was before him, and every minute of the last day which he might ever spend with his family was precious to a loving, gentle spirit. Yet could not Manton pass on like the priest and Levite in the parable, and see a brother sin, without at least an attempt to save him? He was one who sought in faith to sow beside all waters, to let pass no opportunity of doing his Master's work. His few words, his little tract, were as seed sown in a grateful soil. When Manton, toiling in a far distant land, had forgotten entirely his conversation with the seller of fruit, the poor man was blessing the day when he had met one who cared for his soul, and was finding by joyful experience, as so many have done before, that godliness is profitable unto all things, having the promise of the life that is now, and of that which is to come. Thank you for listening to Capitola Black Recordings. I hope you have enjoyed this recording of The Lost Jewel by Charlotte Marie Tucker.